This is the Elemental Educator, the podcast where we kindle the fires of dialogue with the alchemists of education. We're here to embark on a journey where ancient wisdom meets the contemporary world of education. On Elemental Educator, we dive into the deep waters of adaptability, feel the grounding earth of core values, ride the swift winds of change, and ignite the fiery spirit of risk-taking. Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator. And now your host, Tyler Como.
Hello and welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, and today we have two very special guests with us, Sheninger and Nicki Slaugh. Eric is an internationally recognized thought leader in education who works with schools worldwide to help educators meet and exceed their potential, thereby improving outcomes for learners. He is the founder and CEO of Aspire Change EDU, a consultancy dedicated to providing personalized support to educational systems. Before this, Eric was a teacher and the award-winning principal at New Milford High School, where he led the school to become a globally recognized model for innovative practices and sustainable change initiatives that transformed the learning culture and increased student achievement. His work focuses on innovative and practical methods to transform teaching, learning, and leadership. Eric is also the best-selling author and a sought-after speaker, known for using research and evidence-based practices to empower learners and educators. He has received numerous awards, including the CDE Top 30 Award, BAMI Award, NP Digital Principal Award, and many more. Eric has authored and co-authored several influential books, including Disruptive Thinking in Our Classrooms, Learning Transformed, Brand Ed D, Uncommon Learning, and Digital Leadership. He has contributed to the Huffington Post and sits on advisory boards for many innovative companies. His blog, A Principal's Reflections, has won multiple awards and is a go-to resource for educators. Eric began his career as a science teacher at Watchburg Hills Regional High School, which we'll unpack a bit later, and later transitioned into educational administration, where he continued to make significant contributions to the field. Joining him is Nicki Slaugh. Nicki is a transformative leader in education. Celebrated for her visionary impact as a secondary principal, she has redefined school culture by prioritizing personalized learning tailored to each student's needs. Her leadership has led to proactive strategic use of technology to maximize individualized potentials. Nicki's innovative strategies include implementing proficiency scales, developing rubrics, engaging students, and creating flexible, self-paced learning pathways that empower both educators and students. Her advocacy for student autonomy and learner agency has earned widespread recognition. With a career spanning over 2 decades, Nicki initially served as a classroom teacher educating students from kindergarten through 3rd grade. She later transitioned to roles as an instructional technology and curriculum coach, working with the K-9 grades before assuming her current role as a secondary principal. Nicki remains driven by her deep-seated dedication to creating a lifelong love of learning among her students and staff. She loves her job and loves helping schools. Welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast, Eric and Nicki. It's such a pleasure to have you both here.
It is great to be here. I think we're still both recovering from our long bios, and we'd be the first ones to say before we had our aha moments, our bios were simply Nicki, Eric, principal, and that was it. But I'm sure we're going to unpack some of those things today, Tyler.
There we go. And Nicki, thank you so much for joining us as well.
Absolutely.
So I want to start with the bio kind of did it, and I'm sitting here going, half the podcast is already done. But I want to learn first, Earth represents core values for me and the foundation of our decisions. So I'll start with Nicki. Can you share some of the core values that have guided your journey in educational leadership?
Yeah, basically the very first core value I have is every student every day. So making decisions based off the student. The students are my why. And when I look to hire new teachers in my school, I'm always listening for teachers that talk about the students and wanting to put the students first and basing decisions based off the students. So basically, the main core value I have is loving the students and making decisions based off them. And then second, just creating a culture where everyone feels safe and can be themselves and are engaged and happy to be there.
I love that. And I want to know, before we shift over, why did you decide to get into education, Nicki?
I knew from the moment I was 4 years old. I have 2 little sisters and we just played school in my basement my entire life. So it's not what I do, it's just embedded who I am. So there wasn't a year of my life from 4, 5, 6 all the way up that I even considered a different career. I absolutely love teaching and helping people. So it's just embedded in me.
Did you have a moment though of validation in your career where it was just affirmed to you, yep, that was the right call, even from childhood dreams?
Yeah, I started off in the early childhood years, and teaching children to read really impacted me and just ensured that I did the right thing. I loved teaching children to read and write in those younger years.
And I love that's showing from your earth on what's best for kids, because even when you were playing for it as a kid, you play it for fun, but then that validating moment for you was that affirmation that you did something that was best for them. So it's so good to come back to that. It's like a full cycle. And now you get to be in that leadership place, which we'll unpack a bit further. But Eric, I'm excited to hear how you as well got to where you are today. So instead of that question first on earth, I want to hear your story. How did you get to where you are now?
Lots of luck. And I'm being honest, my trajectory is anything but what Nikki said. I didn't want to be a teacher. I never thought I was going to be an educator. I wanted to be a marine biologist. And my parents let me follow my dreams, and I have a degree in marine biology. I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. And then by chance, I continued my education, and I'm like, what am I going to do now? I got a degree in marine biology. And I actually was studying fisheries biology and basically was able to teach freshman lab classes on a graduate assistantship. And that's when I found my passion for education. So I went back, got certified. And the irony here is my first job teaching was teaching marine biology. Well, after that, my father was a principal for 30 years, and I wanted to make a greater difference. So I became an administrator in New Milford, New Jersey. And I was very traditional, but I made no mistake about it. Luck had so much to do with it, because I really didn't really know if we truly know what we're doing. I made lots of mistakes, but I feel I got lucky where the right spotlight or the right came at the right time to.
You know what? I want to add one thing to that right before you go there, because you keep mentioning luck. You mentioned your earth already, though, and it was rooted in wanting to make a difference and an impact. And that's where you found your love for teaching. So I'm wondering, just sitting here, was it luck, or was it because you were making decisions from your value of wanting to make an impact?
I think luck was my overreaching earth. But when I think about other core values that really played a role in my trajectory, honesty, honest about where I was as a leader and where I could be, understanding that no matter where we were, we could get better. I think also having this unwavering commitment to, in the face of adversity, really trying to help others see the value in change. And by helping people see the value in change, you think about honesty, commitment. Another core value is that, are we open to taking risks? I was risk adverse, but when I really began to take risks, that's when things really started to happen. When I think about digital leadership and brand ed, two books that I never thought I would write, those came to me by being a transparent leader and really sharing my journey. And finally, the last aspect of my foundational values, and something that I know Nikki believes in, is this understanding that we're all learners. We can never stop learning, because if we stop learning, we become complacent. Nikki says something like, what is it, Nikki? The 99%, 1%. What is your little catchphrase?
I always tell my teachers and my students, in order to be the 1%, you have to do what the 99% won't do.
Yeah. And you have to be a learner. Like how, Tyler, you've learned to become a podcaster, and you want to grow your practice and evolve your earth. But yeah, I think those are my core values. I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that stick out.
I love that. And you're so right. I just released an episode with Jethro Jones, who's the transformative principal. And one of the things that he mentions is everybody should have their own podcast, because it's the best way to learn, because you get to sit and hear all these stories from all these people. And I have learned so much on this journey as well. And I'm so excited to learn what you guys have to share as well. One thing that you both really focus on is helping schools and educators really cultivate and uphold those core values through educational landscapes that are constantly changing. And Eric, I'll throw it back to you first to just get your thoughts on what is the first thing that people or divisions need to consider when they're trying to cultivate a change through their core value?
Yeah, they have to lead with questions. Questions are more important than answers because no one has all the answers. I don't care how many books they've authored, how many TED Talks they've done, how many listeners they have on their podcast. And no one has all the answers. And I think to really begin to challenge conventional wisdom, it's asking a simple question. Why do we do things the way we do them? Begin there. Then can we do what we're already doing better? Key question there is it's not more work. It's how can we make those incremental steps to improve? And then finally, what tells us if we're actually successful? Moving from talk to action to evidence. So I know it sounds so simple in theory, but it really is. And I think that's why a lot of changes don't happen because we make it more difficult than it really should be.
And that's the whole point of what we're doing here. I'm attempting to take the scholarly theory work that I do and bridge it with the practical application. So it's nice to hear that it does work when you can break it down into those steps in simplicity. And that's awesome. I want to throw the next question to you though, and really get into when we talk about cultivating these core values, I want to bring it to the air element, which is representing the overcoming of adversity and rising above challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges that we're seeing people face, either yourself from principal experience, your teachers, you're seeing students face, or through the work you guys are doing? What are we seeing as challenges that are arising in these change processes?
I think the biggest challenge in education right now is teacher burnout, right? And so it's validating the teachers as professionals and making them feel heard. And so right now there's a lot of negativity of they have too long of a to-do list and they don't really see the why in it or the purpose, right? So I think the challenges as a leader is developing your why and vision and giving your teachers voice and actually listening to them. And I will piggyback off what he said. I really only want to hire questioners. I don't want to hire a robot that just wants a cookie cutter curriculum that tells them what to do day 1, day 2, day 3. I want those think out of the box educators that will question myself as well as the system or any program we have, right? Because that's really how change happens. And so I think the challenge is just creating relationships with your teachers and allowing them to have voice and working with them. Too many times leaders stay out of the all the problem solving time, right? They give them the curriculum, put them in their teams and have them do all the work. But I'm a big advocate to make sure that you're part of all the PLC teams and work hand in hand with your teachers.
While I
And
don't while I don't disagree, I'm going to add another element that I think will contribute to burnout. But this is the one thing that, and I know she'll probably start bobbing her head. And we think about the challenge is time.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, no matter what country I'm in, everyone says, Eric, we don't have enough time. And I think that comes down to refocusing. It's not about having more time. We need to really focus on how do we maximize the time that we have. One piece of advice that when myself or Nikki are facilitating work with school systems, divisions, we tell teachers there's one thing you can control, one thing only, how you use the time with learners in your classroom. That is the fact. Other than that, you can't control anything else. If you're an administrator or leader, the one thing you can control is whether or not you make the time to provide timely, actionable, specific feedback. Can we look for innovative ways to integrate time? Yes. Nikki has done that at her school. I did it as a principal 15 years ago where we used the Google 80/20 Genius Hour model and provided our teachers time during the day. But that's not everyone can't do that. But I think it's maximizing the time that we currently have. That and teacher burnout are two of the challenges that are not insurmountable that can really help educators change and improve their practice.
And there's some very key points here. The first one that jumps out to me is I'm a Simon Sinek fan, and I love the quote, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And selling the why behind things is so important to get investment. And when people buy into the why and you establish that sense of ownership, you start to build towards collective efficacy. And when you start to build towards collective efficacy, the work starts to not feel like work, and it starts to feel like something of excitement. It starts to feel like something of passion because it's rooted in your core element of what you're trying to do. And so managing burnout is also finding ways to create excitement and finding ways to celebrate the good things that are around you. Time is also one of the hardest things to navigate. And I love that you share that. I do want to unpack, Nikki. I'm going to poke and see what you do in your classrooms a little bit and with your teaching staff to create more time for them as well. Somebody once said to me, if it can be done in an email, why is it not done in an email? And that totally changes the way that you want to run staff meetings, PL days, the way you want to do visits, and you find ways to free up time as well. We also have to be aware from leadership positions, we're not burning ourselves out. And so you have to tiptoe that dance of, are you a problem solver or are you teaching people to solve problems? Because as a problem solver, you open the door for everyone to come to you to solve their problem. But as teaching problem solving, you open the door for people to learn and grow as in their own essence as well. Nikki, I am curious, how are you freeing up time in your school?
First of all, I did put a sign on my door when I moved from being a teacher coach to a principal that just said no energy vampires allowed, because I do believe that it starts at the top and you are the energy you want to attract. And so I feel like in human nature, we all tend to find the negative or focus on like the bottom 5% of the issues in the school. And too many times one or two teachers start that and then it just spirals out, and all we're doing is talking about the couple problems we have versus the 95% of amazing things that we're doing. So I took the approach you just said, where my door was not a place for whining and complaining, but it was a place where we could work on solving problems together. And then that kind of created an atmosphere that everyone knew in the faculty room or in my office, we were only talking about how to improve things or what we valued about the students, and there were versus the negative approach. And that was so transformational, because when your principal is happy and your teachers are happy, then your students are happy, right? And so
Yeah.
Nyla, on Nikki's behalf, I'm going to add other things because I was fortunate enough to coach in her building, and they have a half day for professional learning every Friday,
we do.
and she leads the professional learning for the staff.
That's
Also,
amazing.
every day to start school. What is that period called, Nikki?
A prep period.
They have a student prep period every day where the teachers and students actually review where they are in terms of the learning process, because they got rid of points, they got rid of grades, everything's proficiency scales. She built time into the schedule for teachers and students to look at what they need. And there was another thing that she did called mastery minutes. So can you give a quick summation of that, Nikki?
All right, so student prep period is basically felt every single student also needed a prep period, just like our teachers. So it was a great way to help students understand what the point of that class is versus a homeroom or advisory. So they're going to come in every day and they're going to look at our student tracker, which tracks where they're at in the learning process. Eric said, when you remove points and percentages and the kind of the game of school, students need to be able to identify where they're at. So previous to creating this class period, we did create proficiency scales, which provided clear and transparent guides for our learners to know where they're at and what their goal is. So every morning they get to check where they're at in the learning process, check if they've proven mastery on the specific state standards that we're focusing on. And then if by chance they did not reach mastery the first time they attempted it, then we require all the students to meet with their teacher one-on-one or small group to get a reteach a different way and do some additional practice before they attempt the prove it or assessment again. And we built in a time called mastery minutes, where the focus is mastery, and students have the autonomy to look at their tracker each day and choose which room works for them. So we have obviously the core subjects where they'll get the reteach, because we expect mastery and we want our students to learn. That's the whole point of school, right? But we also have rooms like the acceleration room that is more of a quiet study hall where students can work at their own pace and possibly work towards doing 2 years of math in 1 year. We have a collaboration room where if they want to study or work on a project and collaborate with friends. We have a maker space room where if they're caught up on everything and reach mastery, they can tinker, or an academic fit room where they can go outside. And then we have a peer tutoring room where our National Junior Honor Society students actually tutor their friends if they need it. So we just provide a time where learning is the focus and students have choice.
Tyler, I think that's real important. When we talk about time, 3 different strategies: professional time for professional learning, and 2 different times for teachers to work with students, but students also to follow their own path.
Totally agree. And it sounds like to me, we have what's called win time, whatever I need, right? Or what I need. Yep. And then we also table that with kind of what you're doing. We'll just call it an RTI block, response to intervention block, and letting kids choose and dictate where they go. My question for you here, Nikki, before I move on down the line is, as a principal, you would be told within your given timetable frame, you have to meet X amount of instructional minutes for classes and schedules and times. How are you able to incorporate all these freedom blocks and then still incorporate all your curriculum?
We chose to do a 5 by 5 block schedule at Quest, and we double block math and ELA. So they do receive math and ELA every day, and then the additional classes. We do have to turn into the state of Utah our minutes, but we still receive, our classes are still an hour. We just took, I don't know how it worked out, but we just embedded a 30-minute student prep and a 40-minute mastery minutes and submitted to the state. And we have our class periods are an hour. So back to what he said with time, it really doesn't matter. Seat time doesn't really matter. And I don't know if, Eric, is this a Utah thing? It doesn't matter how many minutes I'm in the actual class. I don't know how it is out of state. So it's not, you need 90 minutes per period. It's seat time as a whole. It's more of 180 days. So they give freedom on how you choose to run your schedule.
That's really cool. So where I am, we're told kids in elementary need 950 hours of education, where 30% of that time needs to be dedicated to their science or their English or their math or their social. And it's broken down percentage based. And when you hit junior high, it's broken down into hour based. And when you hit high school, you're told each subject, you have to offer 1,000 hours in high school of programming. And how you go about that is up to you. So I wonder if that's the flexibility is just a little different where you are. That sounds so interesting to me, and I'm
I
really
believe
looking
that
forward.
passed a couple years ago. They didn't fudge on the days. Like we still have to do the 182 days, but they did allow us to use the minutes how we felt would meet the students' needs.
Very cool. Now, both of you can probably answer this, and I'll let you two fight over who wants to answer it first. Along the way of these things that you're implementing, and along the way of these decisions you're making, even though they might be the best decisions rooted in the best core values, there is pushback and there is resistance towards change, and there always will be. What kind of pushback did you receive in what you're trying to do, and how did you overcome that and spin it to a positive direction?
I just want to push back politely on something that you said.
Sure.
Best decisions. There is no such thing as a best decision or best practice. That's a fallacy. That's what we're made to think. There are effective decisions. We don't like to use deficit minded thinking, right, wrong, good, bad. But how do we make effective decisions that could either result in a small win? And by the way, we believe there are no such things as small wins. A win is a win. Or something that's going to more dramatically change culture at scale. I think pushback comes from when you're not transparent, when you're not honest, when you don't effectively communicate, when you're not rolling up your sleeves. I ran professional learning for my staff after school. I remember when no one showed up. But then when we hit our stride, the majority showed up. Nikki runs it every Friday, and she will not relent from that. So you have to, taking a quote and tweaking it from Gandhi, you got to be the change that you wish to see in education. So that modeling, that transparency, helping people see the value, connecting to research. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Leadership is not telling people what to do. It's taking them where they need to be.
I love that. And I think about when we're in front of kids and all of these conversations we're having, it seems silly, but you would not talk to a kid and say, I'm going to solve all your math problems for you. I'm going to solve all your English problems for you. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do. You're going to coach them through figuring it out. Why is that all of a sudden different when we become leaders and work with adults? It shouldn't be. It should stay the same. And it's the idea of failing forward and moving forward, because learning only happens when you fail, right? And so in order to grow and in order to overcome things, I love that you've connected it back to earth And you're really emphasizing the importance of you need to know your why. So, with that, we have the Aspire to Change EDU is built upon fundamental principles. How do these influence your approach when you're consulting with schools?
Well, that's something that we're going to be able to tackle both because Nikki just facilitated her first work in one of our systems in Florida. I'm hoping that she's going to be able to add on from her perspective. But I think that she'll also be able to add on some of the things as to why she believed in Aspire Change. The foundational principles are simply efficacy. We hear everyone likes to talk about what they're doing and what they have done. We need to move from talk to action. When we put our goals, our vision into practice, what is that evidence that shows that it's led to a tangible result? Another fundamental principle is moving away from opinions and ideas and really focusing on what does the research say? Using research as a foundation. A core value, and Tyler, I'm sure you can agree with this. Educators want people who are doing the work, did the work. But I'm not naive to think that, hey, I've been out of the classroom in the school for, that's why I partner with practitioners like Nikki who are still working in schools because they have an edge to them that you just can't put, it's hard to quantify how important that is. And then finally, the fact that, Nikki loves to talk about moving away from cookie cutter curriculum, which is so true. We need to move away from cookie cutter professional development, something that's done to educators, to professional learning, something people want to do. Tailored, customized, personalized. We don't care what you call it, but the idea is simple. What are your challenges? What are your goals? How can we help you do what you're already doing better? And I'm hoping Nikki's going to have some wisdom to add to what I talked about in terms of the core values of Aspire Change.
Basically, I was very picky. I had went 6 years on this journey without bringing a consultant in because we were taking risks and trying things, and I couldn't find anyone that had the exact vision. So I was really hesitant of bringing someone in to start training my teachers because I told you that teaching's just embedded who I am. So I feel like they're my students, and I'm very cautious who I bring in for them. But then I had met Eric and read his disruptive thinking book and realized that he was very knowledgeable and we had the same vision. And then I had to myself, what do you want to do next? And I needed to take my school to the next level, but I also needed someone to provide myself feedback. And so that is why I reached out to Eric. And the best part about our partnership was exactly what he said. I told him, I said, he had worked with a school like a district 30 minutes south of me. And I had said, I do not want you to train my teachers on the same thing that you trained the Davis School District. I said, this is where we're at. I wanted a personalized professional learning approach. And Eric did just that. So we communicated and went back and forth on what my needs were, and he met those needs. And so I love what he does, and I feel I do the same for the schools I work with. It's just meeting their needs and personalizing professional learning for each school differently, right? Because we can't promote a cookie cutter approach to professional learning if we don't want our teachers to do it in schools.
And to add to that, I use the word individualized, and a group can have an individualized program for their division or their school, and students can have individualized, teachers can have individualized plans. It's all about the individualization. And along the way, people need to learn how to build resilience and develop that growth mindset. So, what it would be, and this is for my listeners, if you were to recommend an actionable item that people can start tomorrow to start building resilience and fostering their own growth mindset, what does that look like?
Okay, I gave Nikki enough wait time. I feel it's the keys to change is consistency and continuity and building upon those aspects. I think that consistency and continuity, very difficult question. I struggled with it, which is why I was hoping that Nikki was going to respond. It's very difficult. And I think resilience is something when we think about that competency, it's hard. I don't necessarily think you can teach resistance. I think over time you can learn it, but resistance and mindset are going to be impacted by attitude, by behavior, also by experiences. And when you talk about resilience, yeah, now I'm confident as I'm babbling how I'm going to answer that question because I've seen it in Nicki's school. Why do the teachers embrace change? They become resilient because Nicki is the one helping them in proficiency scales. She's facilitating and planning a 2-day retreat in the summer. She meticulously plans for all those professional learning days on Fridays. She's modeling that resilience. And in turn, it's that expectation. I don't think that she bestows tough love. I think she has high expectations. And in every school system that I've been fortunate enough to support, the ones who haven't changed for the sake of change, they're changing because they know that's the only path forward. It's because of that modeling, that resilience, and that lead by example, which I think is so important.
And one of my favorite quotes is high expectations is an act of love, while low expectations are an act of apathy. You just have to make sure you're setting the right high expectations. Another really good conversation along the lines as an example for that is if your expectation is that every kid is going to be able to do 5 plus 6 by the end of the year, once they get there, you have nowhere to go. So your expectation needs to be that every kid is going to be doing their best at math or excel at math or push their own level at math. And now you have an an always moving point that you're never going to reach the end because you can always do better. You can continually set that high expectation and you don't have to bounce from high expectation to high expectation. You have one high expectation, and that's that people are going to do their best. Now, Nicki, this one will come back to you though. As a practicing principal in this, bringing them in, we've talked about being grounded in our earth. We've unpacked some core values, and then we slammed some air into there, and we talked about the adversity people face and needing to break barriers and build the resilience. We're into that process of water where we're now bringing about that change, and you've brought about change into your building. What are some of the key strategies you took upon to help your school embrace and implement those changes effectively?
Like he said, it was definitely modeling, but it goes back to the asking questions. The biggest risk we took in a secondary setting, obviously when I was an elementary teacher, the focus wasn't on grades, right? We didn't have to report grades to a system like we do in a secondary setting. So the very first risk that I took, and the biggest one, was I wanted to remove all points and percentages and extra credit opportunities. I did not want there to be a game of school, because it wasn't focused on the learning. And so I had to ask questions to my teachers as well as my community and stakeholders. What does 18 out of 25 really mean to you? What does that tell the educator? What does that tell the student? And what does that tell the families? What is the goal for your students to learn, to be prepared for the next school year, to pass the end of level test or ACT or SATs, right? What are your goals? What do you want for your children? Obviously, we want to focus more on teaching students to be lifelong learners and be little self-advocates and understand how to self-reflect and self-assess themselves and focus on life skills. So it's just asking questions and getting your audience to think. As a leader, if you can facilitate these conversations and come up with those key questions, then I feel like change is smooth, because then you're not telling them this is my decision or what I think we should do.
Thank you for sharing. Eric, same kind of question here. So when you're implementing changes through the work you do with divisions, principals, various leaders, how are you building that dynamic to set them up to effectively implement a change?
A lot of listening, processing, patience. Change is a process. It's not an event. And I take the opposite approach of most people that do what I do. I tell them I'm not an expert. I don't have all the answers. I don't. I am a learner. And I said this to Nicki and I say to all of the principals I work with. My goal is that I hope I will learn as much from you as you will me. And I think when we think about leadership, it's about mirrors and windows. When you look in the mirror as a leader, as an educator, do you see the opportunity to grow? And when we look through the windows are where our people reside. The windows are our best asset. Do you provide your people the affirmation and support they need to grow. So I think those are critical. And again, there's not one recipe. That's why I cringe when I hear other organizations say, you must do it this way. That's just not reality.
You mean to tell me those videos I see fix your golf swing in one simple tip? That's not, there's more than one way to maybe fix it. There
Yeah.
we go. Now, are you guys fans of the 7 habits? What you're speaking to throughout this entire podcast, it's just resonating with me. I keep coming back to the habit of seek to understand, then to be understood. And you're bringing up this really powerful point of always being a learner. So, Eric, what role does continuous professional development for you play in ensuring that these teachings and leadership practices that you're working with and working with people on are sustainable and impactful?
Yeah, I'm gonna steal a quote from Barnum in The Greatest Showman. Comfort is the enemy of progress. If we become complacent, we burn out. But also, the world is changing. Little over a year ago, no one was talking about generative AI. And now look, it's all over the place. So professional learning is that means to not only provide people with the strategies, but to share best, to share effective strategies. And that's what people want. But professional learning, it has to be not just ongoing and job embedded, but live by the tenets of personalization, voice, choice, path, pace, place. How do we build in avenues where if you're already doing the work, that you can go at it at a deeper level? Or if you're a phys ed teacher, art teacher, how can you get that specific support? Same thing with central office and building administrators. So and the research has shown over and over that the professional learning that does not get results is drive-by and one and done. And we did our professional growth period, win time for teachers in lieu of their duties in my school. You heard how Nicki has her time, embedded PLCs, all that stuff. So we really want to think about, is the professional learning actually supporting educators and inspiring them to look at those small shifts to their practice?
And you talk about starting to make decisions, starting to make risks. And now we're getting to the fire element, which fire means a lot of things. It does mean the risks and the decisions we make, but it's also our passion behind those things. And fire is the one element that is actually and can be external from our bodies, where the other 3 elements are within us, and how we handle our core values and face change and implement change. They come from within, but our sources can be external as well. Nicki, I'm curious, when you're making decisions and you're taking risks, or something's exciting to you and you've become passionate about it, how did that correlate between your staff, and how did you go about your decision making process on that risk?
I think it's setting up front, like I set the stage up front that I really wanted teachers to love their job. And so I needed to identify all of their strengths at the beginning, as well as when I hire new teachers. So I think it's making sure everyone feels valued and sharing it with my entire staff, everyone's strengths, always celebrating those wins and making sure everyone understands that they are part of our team for a specific reason. And so we're a team to where we always challenge, inspire, and support each other. And I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I do believe it is the key to your question, because I have to create a culture where my teachers feel safe and feel valued first. Then when I have these grand visions or ideas and I need them possibly buy in or believe the same thing, because that's where the magic happens between the teacher and the student, it's easier, right? Because we have a respectful relationship within each other. So it just comes back to the culture you set of being a team, but not only between principal or leader and teachers, but I really wanted to create an atmosphere where principals, teachers, and students were one team. So just making sure that we support each other and are there for each other, and modeling to our students that we're constantly supporting each other. My teachers go in and out on their prep periods to observe each other and leave them their fabulous finds and so forth. So we're constantly modeling to our kids that we are a team and we like each other. They see myself in the classroom. So it really fixes that stress that you asked me to talk about, because the clue up front
Yeah,
is
you actually fully answered the question right away when you talked about being collaborative and having transparency, because a risk is not really a risk if everybody around you already knows what it is and what the decision is, and if it's rooted in your earth and in your core value. And you talk about building up that collective teacher efficacy. That is, if you're into Hadi's influences,
Mhm.
that is
Right up top.
huge in defining the success of a school. And in what you're doing, sure, you have to make decisions, but if you're willing to go to your staff, your students, your stakeholders, even, and we'll put everybody out there and say, this is what I have to make a decision on. What does everybody think? Where are our minds? This is the why we have to make it. You're actually going to recognize that decision's made for you. And you're going to realize which one has buy-in, which one doesn't have buy-in, where you can expect some pushback. And it's uncomfortable to do that the first time, but I always think back to the 7 habits. That's being proactive. That's sharpening your saw. You're coming back to that collaboration, you're coming back to that conversation.
When I model
In
to them that I don't feel like I'm perfect, that's why I even was willing to hire Eric as a professional to come in to give myself feedback. So it's not
Yeah,
just
and
I'm always giving them feedback. Eric worked with my teachers also, but truly, how often do leaders receive feedback? And I
absolutely.
wanted to go to the next level.
Absolutely. And you're really talking about just being honest, and you're coming back to the core value of honesty. I have been asked so many questions this year in my first year of principalship where my response is, I don't know, but I'm going to try my best to find the right answer for you. And maybe not the right answer, but an answer for you to see where what we can learn together.
And Tyler,
Which
you mentioned something so important, the ability to articulate, I don't know and I need help. One of the most important elements. And I'm going to interject and share my fire really quick. And the biggest risk is the one we don't take.
absolutely,
I took a risk getting on social media at a time when no one was on social media. It changed my whole professional trajectory. I took a risk when I wrote up a veteran beloved teacher because what that teacher did was wrong. I took a risk knowing that I was going to get backlash from the union, but I had to set that example. I took a risk when we looked at our data. We changed the way we graded. And we did some things but again, the biggest risk is the one not taken. And guess what? You mentioned before, we take that risk and we might fail. First attempt in learning, as you said before, learning is rooted in failure.
learning can't happen unless there's failure. And speaking from my own, that's the reason I'm in leadership right now, is because I chose to take risks and I chose to pursue that. And I could have been sitting easily in my job happy, but wondering, oh, where would I be if I did that? What would it look like if I did that? And the what if, everybody has their what if questions.
Mhm.
It's not like we've all gone our lives taking every risk that's jumped in front of our face. We all have that moment where we wonder what if. You just want to make sure you reduce those what ifs as much as possible by putting it out there, by being transparent, by engaging in those conversations. Now, in your books on personalization, you both discuss innovative practices. And I'll start with Eric on this one. Can you share an example where taking an innovative approach has led to a positive outcome?
Yeah, and what I'm going to do first is I want to define personalization because there's a lot of inconsistency in that. Personalization is not all students doing the same thing at the same time, the same way. Personalization is not putting all kids on a device and having them use an adaptive learning tool. Personalization is all students, what they need, when and where they need it to learn. So I could talk about many examples of where and innovation is not new practice. It's something that we might do consistently. What I talked about before. So it could be a teacher consistently implementing closure and using that formative feedback to reflect on their practice to determine if they have to do a reteach or if the lesson was effective. You don't have to use tech to be innovative, but I will share an example from Nikki's school. One of the areas that she pinpointed as an opportunity for growth was on co-teaching models. And she saw that our teachers could grow and could use support. And we've worked on co-teaching models. We presented different options. We modeled. And now I can say you will see some of the most effective co-teaching per school, whether it's parallel, alternate teaching, stations, one teach, one assist, one teach, one observe. They look at what is the most effective practice, but you'll see that all the time. So that's one thing that we really emphasized in our new book, talking about those customized supports for learners. So that's one innovative change. Co-teaching is not new, but it's often misunderstood and not implemented effectively.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing. Nikki, I'll ask the same question for you around this idea of personalization and innovative approaches to make a difference or positive impact on your school.
It can be as simple as identifying that, say, your A first period class is different from your A fourth period class, right? So if, for an example, if you think of an
Right.
English class, your first period might really be struggling those group of kids on understanding what empathy is. So you may all be working on constructing a specific text response in your ELA class, focus on specific standards, but just being innovative enough to identify the needs of that certain period and choose articles that will meet their needs at that time. So really being relevant, right? Where maybe fourth period, you have a lot of students. I am a tech school, so computer science is big. And so maybe you have more students that were possibly placed together that would like to learn more about the upcoming, say, in computer science. So choosing articles that fit those kids. So it doesn't have to be this crazy innovative thing. Something as little as that is personalization and meeting the needs of kids. Just actually identifying the students as learners and getting to know them as people, and then providing options for them to be engaged versus compliant and just checking off the boxes.
Notice we didn't just throw out, oh, use a choice board. Yeah, we're innovating, we're personalizing. Yeah, we see a lot of ineffective choice boards. And so the main point here is innovation, new, better, but an actual result that is an improved practice.
Well, because if you choose readings that they're interested in, they'll actually read it, right? So then you will have results. So just little simple things like that. Or when I remove the barriers in my self-pacing classroom, those students that have been bored for numerous years waiting for each student to ask the questions in the whole group teacher-centered classroom, when I removed the teacher from the front of the room and did more flipped classroom approach within the class period and did more of a blended learning environment where those students that may already have prior knowledge on that specific standard could prove proficiency at their own rate. Now they have the power. Now they feel independent. And so they can set goals to do 2 years of math in 1 year because I removed that boundary. Or like he said, on the other end of the spectrum, I may have students that have been pushed and exposed through all the curriculum, but they never really learned. So they're in a grade level math class, but they're missing some foundational skills. With personalization, you're going to identify those holes and gaps. And through co-teaching and setting up a support model, you actually can fill those holes and gaps in, right? Versus stressing about the quantity and making sure you just expose them to all. So it's just all day long putting students first and making sure their needs are met is what personalization is. And I think everyone in our heart and soul to do that.
And you just rooted it right back to earth and the core values and why we do what we do. And through both of your explanations, you actually explained how you bring that fire, that external source that I talked about, towards the kids and towards the teachers and the people you work with. You root the earth in people, and then you can be innovative and push the fire on them. And then you can let them start to play with that fire. Eric, what are you hoping people action in their lives tomorrow from the message you deliver?
I hope that they understand it's the small shifts to practice that are implemented consistent and with continuity that lead to the most meaningful change. It's not about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Nothing that Nikki and I talked about is new. Nothing anyone gets up on stage or writes about is new. It's understanding where we are, how can we improve, and then following through. So nobody wants more work. Nobody wants more work. My hope is that people do the right work, better work.
And Nikki, you said it took you a little bit of time to jump into what you're doing right now. What does your future look like?
That is a great question. Like I said, teaching's just embedded who I am. So right now I still have a large love for my students and kids, and I really love being at a school. I love going in and out of the classroom all day and just being part of that whole process. But Eric's provided opportunities to where I can go in other schools and make a larger impact, which I'm extremely fortunate for. I'm so grateful he's doing that because, again, I'm still teaching. I'm just teaching teachers and scenarios in different schools, and I'm learning so much. And I just want to continue to teach and continue to learn and continue to improve and impact others wherever I'm at.
I love that. Now, Nicki, I'll bring it back to you and then we'll let Eric answer this one as well. What advice would you give to anyone listening that's struggling with adversity?
Just to follow their heart. A lot of my decisions are following my heart and having hope and back to your why and taking those risks and utilizing, say, a book like we wrote that's really easy to read and provides numerous ways that you can just implement. Just stepping out of your comfort zone and following your heart.
My response would be, you're not alone. The world is such a smaller place because of technology. Reach out. My DMs are open on every single social media site. If I can't help you, I'll point you in the direction of someone that can, but you're not alone. People want to help. But leadership is about action. And that action could be that vulnerability where, hey, I need help. Can I float this idea off? Can I bounce this idea off you? So just know that you're not alone.
And you segued to one of my last questions. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
I'm pretty much everywhere. So you can go to ericsheninger.com and then find I'm in every social media space there is. And I also hope that you'll check out Nicki and I's latest book, Personalize, Meeting the Needs of All Learners, which is available worldwide on Amazon.
I'm just NickiSlaugh.com, same as Eric on Twitter, Instagram, all the places. So we're both really easy to reach and always happy to help.
Love that. Nicki and Eric, it's already been 56 minutes. I can't believe the time went so fast. I've had a blast. I've learned so much. I'm inspired to go back into my building and continue to lead with my core values and continue to ignite that fire, knowing that when I'm faced with error and adversity, leading with transparency and honesty is going to help get me through a lot of those tough decisions. I sure hope that the listeners really appreciate the time that you've taken to sit down with me. Thank you so much for joining me on the Elemental Educator podcast.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Elemental Educator. Our aim is to illuminate optimal educational practices on a global scale. And second, we want to shine a light on the expertise and knowledge that Tyler brings to educational institutions. He's not just a talking head. He's a practicing educator, a school principal, armed with a master's in educational administration, and on the brink of completing his doctorate. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator. And to contact us, fire off an email. See what I did there? Fire off. Okay. Send an email to elementaleducator@gmail.com. See you next time on the Elemental Educator.